Hey yogis, Mackenzie Fly here, mom, yogapreneur, teacher trainer, retreat leader, and your guide to master your yoga teaching. This podcast is your weekly dose of actionable wisdom and candid chats with industry experts. Learn to connect deeper, weave yogic magic, and lead by example. Full disclosure, I'm still mastering it too, but together we'll skyrocket your impact and income. Hit subscribe and let's grow, one episode at a time.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to MYYT, where you are learning to level up your yoga teaching one masterful class at a time. Today, I would love to talk to the person, the yoga teacher that desires to write their own yoga teacher training program and potentially is curious about the process of submitting your yoga teacher training program to Yoga Alliance to become an accredited yoga school. So if that's you, keep listening because I recently went through this process myself, and I would love to share with you some benefits of that, as well as the 8-step process to get you there. I'd like to illuminate some mistakes that I made in hopes that you can bypass them, and then lastly, offer some tips to streamline the process, make it a whole lot less stressful and easy. So let's dive in. Okay, I think it's worth talking about in the beginning, what are some benefits of hosting a yoga teacher training or having a yoga teacher training school? There's this phrase, I've said it before on the podcast, but I'll say it again because it's just so good. When one teaches to learn. When one teaches to learn. What does this mean? It means that whenever you are trying to teach somebody else something, you are learning in the process. And this is really what happens when you teach yoga in general, or when you are teaching other people how to become yoga teachers, that in you attempting to imbue, inspire, and share some of these things, you are instilling it deeper in yourself. That's a huge benefit of teaching YTT, is that it kind of holds you responsible to really embody, to really live, to really understand, to articulate all of these concepts. And you get back so much just by being in that process. I also think that the energy of YTT, the container of YTT, is so special. Remember your first YTT? Like, it just feels so good to be in a room full of people who are curious, who are down to do self-inquiry and study and personal development. So by you having a yoga teacher training program and maybe being the lead educator or teacher, it means that you're in that energy again and again, depending on how many times you offer this a year. That's one reason why I love hosting yoga teacher training programs, is it just gets me back in that energy, back in that space, and back in connection and contact with people who want that and desire that. And I'm really grateful for it because it's a great energy to be around. When you host a yoga teacher training program, it means that you are a part of empowering more people to share yoga. Which, if you are a yoga teacher, it means that you probably want to share yoga with the world. And by becoming a yoga teacher trainer or educator, it means that you're kind of multiplying that potential for impact because you're creating others who have that skill. So it means that your reach goes so much beyond what you could possibly do by yourself because you're creating other yoga teachers. In this way, it means that you are part of impacting the world in a bigger way. And on the flip side, it becomes potentially a more profitable endeavor for you as a person on the planet who needs to make money. Yoga teacher training programs are a way to pull in a lot more money for you as a teacher. Now that we talked about a few benefits of having a yoga teacher training program, I think it's worth asking yourself, what is your motivation for creating a YTT? It's important to contemplate and really meditate with what is my personal motivation for writing a yoga teacher training. I'm going to share with you my journey into becoming a yoga teacher trainer and facilitator. I taught for a long time. And I had these amazing teachers who were really present to my development, and they would come take my classes a lot and give me a lot of feedback. And it was those teachers that kind of put my name in the hat at this corporation that I was working for and said, this would be a really great person to teach yoga teacher training one day. And so I started out really as just an assist. I would come to these yoga teacher training sessions and just kind of observe and kind of receive it again from the student perspective, but be viewing it with the intention of one day guiding and facilitating it myself. And I would really encourage you to go this route as well. Be a teacher for a long time. And then if you want to lead yoga teacher trainings, it's important to just assist, to be in the room, to be in the space, kind of helping without necessarily having the pressure to provide that energy the first time. That I found that really, really helpful and useful for me. And I want you to have the same journey because it feels really natural and progressive that way. You don't want to obviously be barely having barely taught yoga in general and then trying to teach other people. If it feels really stressful and really big and really daunting, it's probably an indication that you aren't really ready for that. And it's not coming from a place of embodiment. It's not coming from a place of having assisted. So let that try to be your journey. It'll feel much more natural that way. So I had worked for a corporation where I was leading the yoga teacher training program for many years. I led a 200-hour program about 12 times, one of which was actually online, having done it in the global pandemic. And one was a 300-hour YTT. So I had all of this experience facilitating the program. However, that program was outlined and created by somebody else. Which means eventually, after years and years of leading somebody else's program, I started to get this feeling of being limited to what I could teach. And it also started to feel a little inauthentic, I guess. I just had this desire to share it in a way that felt like more of a combination of my own unique experience, my own unique education. And I wanted to kind of combine all of these different trainings and say it in a way that I would say it instead of a way that I had been given. That was a huge motivator for me as to why I wanted to create my own yoga teacher training program, is that I had done it somebody else's way, and now it just felt like it was time to do it my own way. Another reason that I really wanted to write a yoga teacher training program is when you're doing it for somebody else, it means that you're making a percentage of the profit. So in my case, I was encouraged to lead 200 YTTs a year, which each program is about 3 months. So it felt like I was in physical YTT for 6 months of the year, half of the year actually leading the experience. Now, the other half of the year was spent marketing and promoting somebody else's program. And the worst part is that corporation wasn't paying me for the marketing or promoting, and they also weren't helping at all. So I was doing all of this work for free, basically, to sell out somebody else's program. And I started to really, really resent that. And it made it hard to actually lead the actual program because I had done all of this other work to get those people in there and then was getting paid like 1/16 of the profit that this corporation was making. And so it's okay to want to make money as a yoga teacher because money sustains us. This is how we make a living and continue to be in the world. And it's okay if money is a motivating factor, but I think more importantly, you need to kind of take the time to ask, why do I want to do this? And it's okay if money is kind of in the mix, but hopefully it's not your number one driving force. But if I were to be really honest, this was a big kind of catalyst as to why I finally made some change, is that I was like, you know what, I'm either going to keep doing it this same way and not make very much money and keep being frustrated with the way things are, or I'm going to do something different and write my own and go for it. Go for it in a way that feels more me, which is exactly what I did. My invitation to you right now is to just ask yourself, what is my motivation for creating a yoga teacher training? The next thing I would say is you need to ask yourself, am I going to register with Yoga Alliance? And before you can even answer that, what in the world is Yoga Alliance? It's this weird situation where everybody wants that stamp of approval of Yoga Alliance, but I think a lot of people still are unclear as to what exactly it is, what it does, why you need it. So I want to answer some of those questions here and now. Yoga Alliance is technically a nonprofit American organization, and they claim that their purpose is to really promote and support the integrity and diversity of teaching yoga. So it's basically this governing body that gives credibility to a program. Now, as with all organizations, there can be corruption, but the main purpose is really just to try their best to filter, to screen programs, and uphold a certain standard so that across the board, there's this cohesion worldwide of yoga teacher training programs. Recently, there's been some updates. They have enhanced standards for Yoga Alliance, which is a good thing. I think they realized that a lot of programs were vastly different in what they were teaching. So they've tried to elevate the standards, and mainly the big elevation there is who is qualified to lead a yoga teacher training. They've raised that bar. Okay, so here's some myths. You don't actually have to be registered with Yoga Alliance as a teacher. So it's not required once you graduate YTT to register with Yoga Alliance. And in fact, that's my experience. I didn't register with Yoga Alliance for the first 10 years of my teaching career because I started teaching when I was in college. I'm like this poor college kid. Like I don't have $100+ a year to pay some corporation that I don't really see the point of paying. So I didn't register with Yoga Alliance for 10 years, and you do not have to do it to be a yoga teacher. Because quite frankly, it's still not really common practice for employers or yoga studios to search Yoga Alliance, the directory, to see if you are registered with Yoga Alliance. And I think that's the aim. That's like what Yoga Alliance is thinking that places will do, is that employers will use it as almost like a directory or a phone book of who is registered with Yoga Alliance to see if they are accredited, but it's just not actually, like, it's good in theory, but it's not what's happening. So yoga studios hire you off of your audition, right? You go in and you give a sample, you like prove to them that you can teach a class. That's really what they're hiring you off of. Your skill and your example of skill, not necessarily the slip of paper or searching some Yoga Alliance directory to see if you're registered with them. The same is true for your yoga school. You don't have to be registered with Yoga Alliance to have a yoga teacher training program and to be a yoga school. So let's just bust those myths right there, is that it's actually not mandatory. But weirdly, even though it's kind of like, if it's not mandatory, why should I then do it? It is becoming more common for people to look for that stamp of approval, even though they might not really understand why. So it's this weird conundrum where it's like, it's kind of pointless, but you also should do it. And I just wanted to address that because it might be worth it just to have the stamp, but also know that it probably is nothing more than just a stamp. Here's a couple of other criticisms that I have with Yoga Alliance. Personally, for somebody who didn't even register with Yoga Alliance, a main reason why is I was like, okay, well, here's this $100 fee for me to be a registered yoga teacher. Where is that money going? And the fee is even greater when you become a registered yoga school. It's hundreds of dollars. Where is that money going? Is it doing some sort of yogic thing in the world? It's hard to tell from their website. So that's the confusing thing, is like, I don't really understand what I'm actually funding. And then the other thing is like, what does it actually mean to be a registered yoga teacher if it doesn't actually increase my chances of being hired? It doesn't actually feel like something that I need. Another thing is that the highest designation that you can have in Yoga Alliance is what's called an E500, and the E standing for experienced, which means that you've manually entered into the Yoga Alliance website that you've taught 2,000 hours, which quite frankly is not that hard to do. If you're teaching yoga multiple times a week, you can get there pretty quickly. And 500 hour means that you've either taken a 200 hour plus a 300 hour to add together a 500, or you just took a 500 hour YTT right out of the gate. That's also not that hard to get to. So that's the highest designation, but you could have two very drastically different people with that same designation, and it doesn't accurately reflect their skill and their years of experience. So I find that really frustrating on the website because it doesn't really represent me and my experience and my skill, but that's the highest designation that you can kind of have on paper or on this website. It doesn't reflect. However, on the flip side, the positive to Yoga Alliance and really just what it's trying to do from an academic perspective is all Yoga Alliance wants to do is provide some sort of basic scaffolding and framework for what is the bare minimum that yoga teacher training programs need to include in their experience. And that's important that we all have some sort of like minimum benchmark. Okay, so this episode is for the people who have answered yes to the question of, am I going to register with Yoga Alliance? Even though it's silly, I do recommend that you register with Yoga Alliance. So it's important to think, what is the timeline? What does this process realistically look like? How long is it going to take? And the answer to that is that it depends. Okay, it depends on your experience. And it depends on whether or not you actually already have the manuals, both the student manual as well as the teacher manual. If you are in a position where you were given a manual or you purchased a manual, the application process takes anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. That part is not the long part. The long part for most people is probably in writing the program itself. In my personal experience, my business partner and I, we wrote ours in about 2 months, but I've heard of other people taking anywhere between 2 months to 2 years. So it can take some time because it's a big task. You're trying to figure out what exactly you're going to teach people within these 200 hours. So I'd give yourself a decent amount of time. And depending on where you're coming, like whether you're just starting from scratch or you've already got that manual, about, let's say generally speaking, 2 years. There's some prerequisites that you need to be aware of when you have a yoga teacher training program and school. And the main one, the only real one, is that you have to have what they call a lead trainer. And a lead trainer is really just a person that is recognized by Yoga Alliance as an E500. So to lead a yoga teacher training program that's accredited by Yoga Alliance, you have to have somebody that's been 500, that's gone through 500 hours of training and is registered through Yoga Alliance to have that stamp of approval on your school. But that's really it. So you can technically have a yoga school yourself and not be that lead trainer. This would be in the case of if you're a school or a gym, you have some sort of space and you want to offer yoga teacher training programs, you can have a school, but you need that lead trainer, that lead educator to be also registered by Yoga Alliance.
Are you feeling stuck? If so, this is your exclusive invite to Vortex Yoga Retreat in Sedona, Arizona, this October 11th through 14th, 2024. Sedona's breathtaking red rocks transform into a fiery masterpiece in the autumn. Imagine practicing yoga amidst this stunning backdrop, feeling the ancient vortexes amplify your intentions and awaken your spirit. This retreat is for you if you crave a deeper connection with your energetic body, the chakras, you're ready to align your life with purpose and passion, or you seek a transformational experience to unleash your inner power. Here's what awaits you. 4 days and 3 nights nestled in Sedona's beauty, daily yoga and meditation, delicious local dinners, sound healing, hiking to infamous Sedona vortexes, connection with like-minded souls on this empowering journey, learn chakra balancing principles and practices, and a special gift from your hosts. Don't wait. Space is extremely limited and spots are going fast. Visit rachakaretreats.com/Sedona to book your spot and choose your accommodations, or click the link in the show notes. Use code MYYT for 10% off. Are you ready to balance your energy and align your life?
Here are the 8 steps to writing and submitting your program to Yoga Alliance and getting approved. Step number 1 that I highly, highly, highly recommend is you need to review the Yoga Alliance guidebook and checklist. Do not proceed without doing this. On that guidebook, it's going to give you almost too many details, if I'm honest. It's a little overwhelming when you kind of look at it, but review that guidebook, like read it once through, sleep on it, read it once through, sleep on it. Like try to read every single detail, because what they're trying to do is give you all the answers before you get started. So it's really, really important that you kind of review all of that material. And inside that guidebook, they give you helpful resources like checklists, time estimators, calculators, tutorial videos walking you through the whole process. So I would spend just about a week looking at all of the helpful resources that they've provided and equipped so that you understand the process before you even get started. Inside this guidebook, there's 4 educational categories that are divided up into time, which add up to about 185 hours. So obviously, if you're creating a 200-hour YTT program, that gives you about 15 hours of wiggle room. And it's really in those 15 hours that you get to choose what you want to spend time on. And that's really what differentiates your program from others. So while these other 185 hours are, that bare minimum, that benchmark, and that standard across the board that all YTT programs need to talk about, there's that 15 hours that you get to pick of what you're going to infuse into your program. And this is really what makes programs kind of different, unique, and stand out. So those 4 educational programs are, the first is training, techniques, and practice. And this needs to be about 75 hours within your YTT. Or under this first umbrella, there's the subcategories of asana, pranayama, and subtle body, as well as meditation. The second umbrella is anatomy and physiology, and this needs to be about 30 hours of your program, under which there's the subcategories of anatomy, physiology, and biomechanics. The third category is yoga humanities, and this needs to be about 30 hours of your program, and under this is the subcategories of history, philosophy, and ethics. And then the fourth category is professional essentials. And this needs to be 50 hours with subcategories of teaching methodology, professional development, and practicum. Now, under these 4 main categories and multiple subcategories, there's about 48 core competencies that are all very detailed and outlined within this guidebook. You need to spend time looking at that, because they are not suggestions. And once you actually get to the application, they're going to ask you specifically where you are touching on those topics that are outlined in the guidebook. So create your program based off of this guidebook, because when you go to apply, you will be perfectly set up. Also within this guidebook, it tells you kind of what to expect in the application. And this is really helpful because obviously you want to create your program with the thought in mind, I'm going to eventually submit and apply, and I want to get approved. So pay attention to the language that Yoga Alliance uses in this guidebook, and write in a way that is setting you up to do the application. That sounds kind of vague if you haven't actually done the application, but what I mean by that is they use words like, what is the learning objective? How is this delivered? Who is the trainer? How much time are you going to allot for this topic? So whenever you're kind of creating your program and you want to write in a way that hits all of these topics, that's really going to help you when you go to actually apply. Step number 2, you want to decide on the structure and the format. You want to think, okay, is this going to be all in person, or am I going to do some sort of hybrid where some of them are pre-recorded, some are live but still virtual, or is there an immersion element? So think about how you want to actually deliver this information. Step number 3, write your outline. This is really the brainstorm period and the place and the time when you don't want to get too caught up in the details here. So sit down and just kind of brain dump. Like, okay, now that I've looked through the guidebook and I know what those 48 core competencies are, what are my lectures? What are the experiences? What are the books? Just kind of get a big dump down on paper so that you've kind of got it all out there and it's just this big pile of mush. everything out on paper or whatever is your medium. You want to start to divide things up from there and group common things. And once you kind of see the sections or the individual lectures, look at all of that and give yourself a realistic estimation of how long it will take you to create that section. Okay, so think, what are the actual sections in the lectures? How long will it take me to write that section? Get clear on all of that. Step number 5, create a calendar and some due dates. Now that you see the sections and you kind of generally know what falls under where, think about realistically, how long will it take me to write the trainer guide, the facilitator guide, and think about what the student manual then needs to look like. Give yourself at least a little estimation and then put some dates on the calendar so that you have a plan of attack and you have something that's going to hold you accountable to hit those due dates, meaning the needle keeps moving forward and you don't stay in this like planning trap for forever. You want to give yourself a due date, a submission date, because once that's on the calendar, you're much more likely to actually apply to actually get approved. Step number 6, the most important part and really the bulk of where the work comes in is writing the manuals. And there's 2 manuals, the facilitator guide as well as the student manual. So you could do this a couple ways. The way we did it and the way I worked, and would probably encourage you to do it too, is to start with the facilitator guide first. Write out how you would present the material. How would you give this lecture? And while you're writing out how you would teach it, think about what would be a beneficial way for the student to receive it. What sort of images do they need to see on their paper? What sort of activities, exercises, or practices go with this section? Do they have homework? So write it as the teacher first, but while you're doing that, think about how it would be most beneficial from the student perspective too. This took us about 2 months, which actually I would say is really, really fast. So give yourself a decent amount of time and give yourself the assignment or the task to just do a little bit every day. I would say at least an hour every day writing out some of these lectures, or a block of 2 to 3 hours a week writing these manuals and thinking about not just the teacher manual, but also the student manual. We wrote our facilitator guide on Google Docs, and then we created our student manual in Canva. Now, if graphic design is really intimidating, you can also hire a graphic designer to create the student manual based off of your facilitator manual. But something that might be helpful is just to generally say, these are the main topics that I'm trying to teach on. And depending upon your graphic designer skill, they might be able to just run with that very little direction. But the idea is that you don't want, obviously, the student manual to just be a bunch of text, because that's not the best way people retain. So is there a way that you can add some imagery or different visuals to bring to life these ideas and help with their retention? All right, step number 7, once both are written, the facilitator guide and the student manual, then and only then are you ready to start the application with Yoga Alliance. The application itself took us 2 weeks to complete. It is a beast, and it comes in 2 parts. So the first part is really kind of easy. This is where you're uploading the manuals and assigning who is the teacher. It's part 2 of the application that becomes so tedious and terrible. Okay, I'm just going to tell you, I felt like it was terrible, but I understand it. When I think about the person that is assessing on the back end, I get why they did it the way that they did it, but it's not very fun as the applier. So here's how it goes. Once you've uploaded your manual in part 1, then part 2, you have to go through all 48 of the core competencies and title your version of those core competencies. So let's say, for example, one of the core competencies is marketing and promotion. You would click that core competency, so select that one of 48, and it gives you an option to title it. So let's say your lecture on marketing and promotion is called The Art of Marketing as a Yoga Teacher. You got to title your lecture, and then there's a description box. And this is where it becomes really tedious, is that you have to have a description box, a title for all 48 competencies plus that 15 extra hours. Inside that description box, you need to have a very boring blurb that basically says, inside this lecture, I will deliver the key learning objective of fill in the blank. It will be presented in a lecture style, comma, with a sharing circle, and I will assign XYZ homework, comma, there's journal prompts, something like that, to where it very clearly outlines what they learn, how they're receiving the material, what sort of homework or exercises go along with it. That's in the description box. And you have 48 of these or however many lectures you have of them. So it can get it took us a long time. I'd say this section of the application took us like 2 weeks to just do all of those little description box. On top of filling out the description box, then you have to assign who is the teacher that is facilitating this lecture and how many hours are allotted to this topic. The biggest tip that I have for you is to follow the format given in the guidebook exactly and use their language. Don't write this whole long description because, like I said, you've got to do 48 of them. But make sure that you make it very clear, like this is what they're learning, this is how they're receiving it, this is the homework. Like just keep following that format and that template in each one of the descriptions, changing based off of what is the lecture. It's going to feel really boring and rote to you, but it's what's most clear and is most likely to get you approved by Yoga Alliance. Step number 8, once you have done all 48 plus of those descriptions, you can clearly see that you're hitting all 200 hours. You have the right amount of hours for the lead trainer. Once all of that is in the application, then you click pay. So you submit. And from there, then you really have to wait and be reviewed and potentially receive some revisions for resubmission. Okay, so the fees to submit, you will pay a one-time fee of $400 to cover the comprehension and the assessment from the team of Yoga Alliance people. And then once you meet the Yoga Alliance standards and requirements, once let's say you're approved, then every single year you have to pay registration dues of $240 to be recognized as an accredited yoga school within Yoga Alliance. So this is about $640, but $400 of that is just that one-time fee of being reviewed. Once you submit, on the confirmation page, it says that your application will be reviewed, and that takes about 4 weeks, is what it said on our confirmation page. We actually didn't hear back until about 8 weeks later. They had said that we would hear back on July 17th, and we checked in on July 17th, and we're really, excited to hear whether or not we've been approved. And we didn't hear on that day. So we sent an email, and about 2 weeks later, we kind of heard. Long and short of it is it took about 8 weeks to be approved after submitting. Once we heard back, they had very few tweaks and revisions for us to make. They were really small things, like including a date on our sample certificate and a couple of other small things. But hallelujah, I was so pleased to find that we were approved by Yoga Alliance basically within the first submission and the first time. Now, it's not uncommon for the Yoga Alliance to give you a long list of revisions that need to be made. I've heard of other friends and other yoga teacher trainers or other yoga teachers who have created YTT programs. I've heard that they got kicked back by Yoga Alliance multiple times and had to resubmit their application 2, 3, 4 times and then go through that waiting period again and again and again. So this is where it can become really nightmarish, is if every single time you submit, there's that 4, sometimes 8-week period. You can see how this process gets really dragged out and takes a ton of time. So those are the steps. Step 1 all the way through step 8. Hopefully that gives you an idea of the process of it and helps you feel a little more equipped and empowered to start to do it yourself. Here's some mistakes that me and my business partner made. I want to tell them to you to help you avoid them so that you don't make them as well. A huge mistake would be not to look at the guidebook and the checkbook. So make sure that you don't try to create something without having taken the time looking at that. They are not suggestions. Like I said, those 48 core competencies in the 4 categories, those are exactly by rote what will be on your application in the part 2 that you need to write the descriptions on. So make sure that you look at that and that you write your manual using that as direction. It's also a mistake to try and start the application without having written and finished your manuals. You can't get to part 2 until you have uploaded the teacher and the student manual in part 1. So make sure that before you even get started in the application process, that you've written everything and you are ready to go. It's also a huge mistake to try and advertise yourself as an accredited school through Yoga Alliance before you are actually approved. I've heard some horror stories from other friends who have submitted their application for the first time and then said they're an accredited yoga program through Yoga Alliance. And then when they submitted their application, it got denied. And they had a bunch of revision notes and they had to revise everything and resubmit and then go through that waiting period. And what happened is that they had advertised, they had said they were going to start on this date, but because their application wasn't approved, they couldn't start the actual program. And so they had all of these people wanting to start on a certain date and they had to kind of change the dates and it was just a whole mess. So make sure that you don't actually start marketing for your YTT program until you are completely done with the process, that you've been approved and you are good to go, because it just might end up backfiring on you and being really stressful. Okay, so some tips, things that I would do differently now having been through it. 1000%, I wish we would have used a spreadsheet to keep track of all 48 of those core competencies outlined in the guidebook provided by Yoga Alliance to do accurate math that we're hitting the right time codes. So remember when I was saying that in the guidebook, there's 4 pillars, and in the 4 pillars, this one pillar, it needs to be 75 hours. This other pillar needs to be 30 hours, so on and so forth. Do not try to keep up with that math in your mind. Okay, you're going to get confused and you're going to be like, wait, am I hitting the right number of hours in this category? So do yourself a favor and use a spreadsheet. And start the first column with all the 48 core competencies given to you by Yoga Alliance. And then in the second column, have your version of that. So what is the title of your lectures? And in another column, put in the estimated time that you think it's going to take that you would teach that topic in. And then set it up so that the spreadsheet does the math and kind of adds up all the hours so that you then have it all written out in your own version of a spreadsheet. That way, when you get to the part 2 in the Yoga Alliance application, it becomes really easy for you to see, okay, this lecture aligns with this core competency and it takes this much time. You are going to breeze right through that part 2 of the application, which is where you usually spend a lot of time and can be super tedious. So 1000%, I would say use a spreadsheet to keep everything straight, knowing that you're hitting all 48 core competencies, all 4 pillar topics, and the right amount of time. We ended up using, what we did is we kept everything kind of on a Google Doc, which was kind of good, but not as good as a spreadsheet could have been, because even though we were keeping track of the time, it wasn't adding up all of the hours for us. We were kind of manually keeping track of the hours, which just leaves tons of room for error. And we saw that error when we were entering everything into the system and it was starting to add everything up. So don't use a Google Doc, use a Google Sheet to keep it all straight. Now, another tip would be to know that the review board is different people, which means that the submission process is actually kind of subjective, which stinks. So I heard this story of another company that basically licenses their yoga teacher training program to other yoga teachers. So they give a done-for-you program to teachers who are wanting to have a yoga school. And they had 2 clients at the time who had the same program, right? The same program, and they submitted at the same time. And one was approved with no revisions really quickly. And another one was waiting 8+ weeks. And then when they got the revisions back, there was this whole long list of stuff for them to change. So it was basically the same application. Why was it very different results? It's because there's different people on the back end reviewing and giving the revisions. So I kind of feel like this is actually not really that fair of Yoga Alliance. It's a little too subjective, and it really depends on who's kind of looking at your stuff, what your result is. So just know that going in, that because it's different people, it becomes subjective. Now, the biggest tip I can give you, this sounds a little like, but fudge it, okay? Just fudge it. Keep in mind that on paper, it is not like the actual experience. In one sentence of yoga teacher training, you can be referencing yoga history. You can be referencing teaching methodology. You can be referencing practicum. So it's not so black and white as it is on paper. And this can be maddening when you're trying to assign a certain amount of hours to a certain topic. And you can spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort trying to make it perfect on paper when it's not actually like that in the real life experience. So that's why I say relax a little bit and just kind of fudge it, because it's not going to be perfect, and they overlap. The topics kind of overlap, and they intertwine, they weave into one another, and you touch on it one day in one way, and then you touch on it another day in another topic. And so it's not as black as white as it can be on paper. So just don't like pull your hair out trying to make it perfect, and just fudge it a little bit and give your best guess. If you feel really overwhelmed by the whole process, don't be afraid to seek out support. Okay, so there's companies that have made full businesses on helping you write your own manual, whether that be you want to create your own or you just want to buy one that's already done. That's a thing, and there's business models on that. So seek out support, whether it's having some sort of mentor walk you through the process and designing your own, or just getting one that's already made for you. Yoga Alliance also really has this amazing support line. I would say it's better to call them than email them. In emails, sometimes it's been about a week before I've heard back, whereas calling, you're going to get an immediate answer. Okay, that is everything. I gave you some tips, as well as walked you through some mistakes to avoid the 8-step process, some questions to ask yourself before you even get started. I really, really hope that you found this to be valuable. Create a YTT. Why not? If you have this on your heart, it is a huge calling and a beautiful calling to follow. So I hope that this makes all of it a little bit easier, and that you are one step closer to designing a program of your own genius and your uniqueness, and that you are a part of spreading yoga in a bigger way by making more yoga teachers. If you found this episode helpful, I would so appreciate if you would take a screenshot, throw it up on your stories, and tag me. My handle is Master Your Yoga Teaching, the same as the podcast name, and send this to another yoga teacher who you know is in the thick of this process right now. Share, because the more you share, the more we care and the more we help one another. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much for coming back each and every Wednesday. And until next week, namaste blessed.
Thanks for listening. If this is your first time, peruse our feed to see if there's something else that will serve you. We're so grateful that you're here and invite you to join our inner circle by subscribing to our newsletter. If this episode resonated with you, help us spread the word by sending it to a friend who needs to hear this message. Likes, follows, sends, shares, and reviews help us to continue delivering high-quality content to you for free each and every week. Don't forget to tag @Master Your Yoga Teaching so we can reshare. I am a certified yogi. However, this podcast is intended for information and entertainment only. If you are interested in mentorship or coaching with me, check out the website linked in the show notes to get more information. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on the podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of Mackenzie or CLW Studios. Learn more about Mackenzie, her guests, and CLW Studios by following the links in the show notes. Keep shining, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Master Your Yoga Teaching. Namaste blessed.